experience, which so many women have, and it's just not heard. It doesn't seem to
That's
get
right.
to get
It
in.
isn't. It isn't heard. You know, and it takes different people, different ways to get out of it. I got out of it letting people abuse me through the power of God.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing.
That's it.
Having
Everything else is
attaching your
secondary.
self-esteem to God instead
Right.
of this man. One thing I found helpful, eventually in my experience, I ended up at a shelter that was designed for abused women. And while I was there, I received some wonderful counseling. And the nice thing about specialized counseling in these shelters is not only do you have therapists who are experienced, but you have your peers who are there with you who can point out the BS when you're
Right.
cycling through that, oh, he'll change, or he loves me, or excusing him for this behavior that may, that you're trying to assure everyone's going to go away. Your peers and your therapists who are experienced can call you on it. It's kind of like going to an AA meeting or a Narcotics Anonymous meeting. It's like they know the BS line that's going in your head.
They know.
And that was probably the most effective thing for me. And as you said, my faith in God.
Let's not forget, there is abuse towards a man.
Yeah.
My third husband, that guy would come home from work and the house would be empty. I would have taken off. I don't know how many times I did it to him. I would freak out, kick him. So there's another side that we can't forget.
Right.
There's a lot of men that get abused.
Right.
Because I learned at a very young age that sex was the way to get men, to get money from men or whatever,
Right.
for whatever.
Actually, I have a statistic here about that, because one of the myths is that domestic violence only affects certain people, and the stat that you hear thrown out there a lot is at least 1 in every 3 women has been physically or sexually abused during her lifetime, and that's a solid statistic. But to say it's a crime against women is to ignore that men can be abused as well, that women accounted for 85% of the victims of intimate partner violence, which is how the law looks at domestic violence, but men accounted for 15%. And gay men, lesbians, bisexual, and transgender persons are just as likely as heterosexual women to be abused by their partner. So really the stat should be 1 in every 3 women, gay men, lesbians, bisexuals, and transgenders, if you want to be accurate. But it is a myth. And you describe a behavior which I think tried at one point when I was younger, and I had, when I went to school and started working on a degree, they called it abuse reactive behavior. And you'll see this in homes with children acting out while they're in an abusive situation, where you think the only way to control the out of control situation you're in is by reflecting exactly what's happening to you. And sometimes we test the men in our lives to see if they're going to leave or if they're going to love us less, if we show them just how damaged and unworthy we really think we are inside, if we expose that darkness. And maybe this is a good time to talk about you have some experience with the shelter?
Yes. When I left my husband 12 years ago, I went, with the support of my family, to the DV shelter. I didn't stay long, but I stayed long enough. Through the years, I have kept in contact with the Women's Center, and 4 years ago, I started working for them as a hotline. So I heard so many stories, and of men, and of lesbians, and it was heartbreaking, because unfortunately in this society we don't have the resources to give them a safe place to go.
Right.
Because all of the shelters are geared towards women.
Right.
So men don't have a place to go.
Or men with children.
Or men with children.
More so.
Right. Or lesbians or gay people. They're just not set, or transgender.
Right.
We're just not set up for that.
Right.
So I started working the hotline, and proceeded to move up and to be a case manager for the transitional housing program. The stories that I heard were all very similar. It was heartbreaking.
Don't you find that having all the stories kind of repeat a theme, that it really helped reinforce your leaving? That one, your world wasn't so abnormal that it was unique to you, but two, that it wasn't going to change because it's not changing for that person or that person or that person. Why should you be special?
Yeah, it was, I don't remember this. A lot of people remember the negative things in their life. I don't, it was a big fog for me leaving, but it was the best thing that I ever did for myself. And I've tried to share my story with the clients that I had, to make them understand, or to try to help them understand that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. And it sucks sometimes when you're homeless, when you have kids to feed and you don't have the income and there's no resources available. But you know, you just have to, especially when the girls are in the shelter, you just have to give them hope that there's light at the end of the tunnel and they can do it.
It does take an effort that seems so humongous. It's like this giant Mount Everest in front of you to change your existence, because in a lot of times, because of the control of finances and the isolation, you've lost a lot of not abilities, but a lot of resources that might have been available to you outside of this situation. You might have lost job opportunities. You might not have a bank account. You might not have job skills.
So you're starting over from nothing.
So, and you're starting over from nothing with a mindset of fear, which just grows with the mindset, you know, that how do I start over if I don't know if I'm trying to change myself as well into this unknown world. I know when I was in a shelter, there's a couple of stories I could share. I had my two of my small children with me at the time, and I was pregnant, and there was a woman who wanted to move some of her stuff out of her apartment. This was in Seattle, and so the apartment was downtown, which of course is a very urban environment. So I offered to go help her move her stuff to get some of her precious things that were so important. And of course, as soon as we got there, me with, at least I think I had one child with me, the infant in my arms, her abuser came home because he'd been watching the apartment for her to come back. And it was one of those situations where, you know, both of us are at risk of being killed at this point. He had a criminal history. It wasn't, the odds were not in our favor. And the gamble I had to take was I left my baby on the bed, and I made an excuse that I had to go get cigarettes out of her car or something. And I went out and I called the police, and they came, and to this day I know God was watching, because instead of hurting my infant or hurting her, he jumped out of the window because he was on probation or parole and wanted to escape. He ended up hurting himself. And I'll never forget his eyes looking at me as he's being wheeled out on the stretcher to the ambulance, like, you know, you're next. I never forgot that glare. And another story, being on the West Coast, we have a lot of immigration situations where women who come from other cultures, and in this case, I believe she was Vietnamese, they have a whole dynamic where in a separation or divorce, the children end up becoming the husband's property as opposed to the women. In our society, statistically, women get custody. So this guy followed her all the way from Vietnam to Seattle, and in the shelter system, it's kind of like the like when we sheltered slaves from the South. You have this network and this underground where there's secret houses, and there's miracle transportation that, you know, bounces certain people around, and they do their best to try to shelter you. Well, they transferred her to Chicago, and about 2 weeks after they transferred her, he figured out where she had gone, and he sliced her into ribbons, and she died. So that's too. That one upset me. Another myth we have is that battering is a temporary loss of temper, or like in this case, this guy on dust, that he didn't know what he was doing. But 65% of women physically assaulted by an intimate partner report they've been assaulted multiple times by the